Welcome back to another episode of the Heroes Veritas podcast. I'm your host, Tim Bass, and today I have a very special guest, a good friend of mine, a new, very good friend of mine. We hit it off as soon as we met through a mutual friend, Jeff Pease. He is a peace officer. He is going to be range master at one of our upcoming basic pistol courses. He was formerly a firefighter, and we just seem to hit the right levels on everything. We don't agree on everything, but we know how to talk with each other and kind of have those civil debates when we need to. So I'm super grateful that you accepted my invitation to the podcast. I'm super happy that you're joining us, man.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So real quick, we were talking about this before we hit record, how crazy it is, how fast we hit it off, and how rare it is to find people that you hit it off that late in life, like in today's era, right?
Yeah, I'm 37 years old. You kind of quit counting after 35, but I think I'm 37. And later in life, I'm really starting to realize that I'm a huge proponent of the quality of people, not the quantity of people. And just through the whittling process, I have a small circle, and just to have some, we have a mutual friend. That's how we met, and just who I met way later in life, and he introduced me to you at later in life, and to have such a good click with somebody that you don't have such history with is very rare these days. And it's not that I'm not open to meet new people. It's just I only have a certain amount of hours in my day, so I'm not gonna waste them on just
I don't know
nonchalant
how far you've gotten
relationships.
in the podcast, but when you talk about setting the perimeter, that's exactly what it's about, man. You got to identify your assets and liabilities and make sure you're not putting the energy where it doesn't need to go.
Yeah.
And we video game together. We talk, we're doing this business venture with the, range master and things. And there's just so much that I'm grateful for having you around just as a soundboard. And, we talk while we're gaming. We're not even gaming together half the time. We're just bullshitting while we're online. And for me, I can't tell you how important it is to have that kind of like reprieve. Before we hit the record button, I was explaining to you how busy my day was, and sometimes it can get really overwhelming. And while I'm not an advocate for escapism, and I never have been, I am an advocate for recreation. And knowing that you and our mutual friend, fuck it, Tony, he knows, like are there when I'm at the end of my day and I'm ready to kind of unwind. It's such a blessing to me to have people that sometimes we're talking about something as deep as life, and other times we're talking about something as frivolous as just like whatever frustrated us in that moment, right? And it's such a beautiful thing, like you were saying before this we kicked off the recording. Like, I'm very much on quantity or quality, not quantity. And it's one of those things that you do learn kind of later in life. I'm 34. And it's rare in the sense that even though you don't necessarily like hold back with anybody, not you, just the royal you, there is a certain like vibe that you get from people where you're like, yeah, it was cool, but it's not a click. It's just kind of like, I don't have anything against them and I don't have anything for them. I'm just kind of neutral. They're a good person, I think. Like, but then there's people like you and I where like I met you and I was like, yeah, Jeff's good people. Like, we're good. And I'm really blessed that one, that I have Tony, and now that I have you. So thank you for that.
No problem. And like it's like you said, like it's good to have extracurricular activities. Within my job of being a peace officer, I'm actually in a position where I'm training a lot of new people, and one of the things is getting them ready for this new lifestyle, which is being a peace officer. And I tell them like, hey, the strongest, greatest warriors took off their armor when they get home. They don't wear that armor 24/7. They take off their armor and they have to have that decompression process. And just to have someone you're firing on the same cylinders with, and someone you could bounce stuff off of, and someone you feel safe to open up to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially in today's toxic environment that we have and everybody else, just to feel safe that I know, like, talking with you, that no matter what comes out of my mouth, you're not going to hardcore judge me. And like you said, we may disagree on some stuff, but we got nothing but love in the long run,
Oh,
So
such a
just to be able
mutual
to,
respect there, and that's important.
yeah, and to take that armor off and just kind of decompress and just relax, and you know um have that clear breath, and just know it's like especially when you have someone who it's easy to talk to, because then it's not strenuous at all at that point. So
Yeah, it's super flow, and I love that, and I agree 100%. One of the things that I really resonate with what you were saying is like even the strongest warriors had to take the armor off. Like, armor is stifling. like I know not everybody on that watch my podcast that are part of this audience may not have ever worn sapping plates and a full gear, and nobody's, there may be people that have never had to wear like riot gear or helmets or anything like that. So maybe there isn't that awareness or that knowledge, but being in a hyper vigilant state while wearing highly restrictive gear sets, it's taxing. And I would argue that in those spaces, there's a hypervigilance to behavior, right? Especially in today's society with peace officers. And there's kind of this negative space for it. And it's it's a dehumanizing effort within peace officers to create a villain where maybe there isn't, right? And I say maybe because there's always bad people, right? There's no
Mm-hmm.
across the board statement. But at the same time, if you aren't aware and you've never been in a position where you've had to make high risk decision making on the fly while being stifled, while in hot gear, while dealing with heat, I mean that's exhausting and it's extremely taxing, not just physically. And I think a lot of people in that process of dehumanizing the peace officer tend to put it more towards the physical aspect, right? You hear a lot, well, if they couldn't handle the job, they shouldn't have taken it. It's like, physically, okay, fine, you can go to the gym, you can work out, you can get better, you can develop kind of a thicker skin for that. But emotionally, mentally, I don't care how tough you are, and I've seen it with the military that I've been around. I talked a guy off the ledge last week over PTSD. I had a guy text me today that his buddy's dad, who served in the war, in World War II, committed suicide because his demons finally caught up to him that long, right? So like, to your point, being able to take that armor off is part of being a fully functional warrior. Because if you don't allow yourself to take that armor off, if you're not given that space, if you don't develop that space and set the perimeter properly so that you have that state, that safety to do that, it'll always catch up to you. Always.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the whole, we'll bring this back around to like extracurricular activity. That's why samurais were artists and poets. You know what I mean? Because not only were they, masters at the battlefield, but they were mastering other arts. And I think it was part of that was to get that reprieve and to get that mindset in a different way. You talk about, the mental aspect of it. I had a huge struggle with it when I first started. It really changed me. It jaded me. I was very jaded, and it got to the point where it was heartbreaking because my wife um, kept telling me, like, you're very unapproachable. Like when we're out and about, you have this look upon you, and people that I just meet are like, "Oh my God, you're married to him? Like you're very unapproachable." And me, I always just feel like me. I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm a nice guy. You know what I mean? I can get along with damn near
You said
anybody."
that, and I was like, really, Jeff? Like, I
Yeah.
don't think I would have never got that. So, like, that's saying something.
But yeah, so like it took conscious effort to when I went out in public. I think it's come in secondhand nature now because I'm getting a lot of better grasp and I'm getting a lot of more mentally stronger. But it took a conscious effort of acting like for me how it felt. I was acting overtly nice, like I was just Mr. Nice Guy. But I think as it was projected in the world, it was just like, oh, Jeff's kind of a nice guy. But in my inside, I felt like I was like, hey, how are you doing? You're a really good person. But it wasn't that. And I think I was just so far the other way and so jaded that I had to fight myself out of that. And it's just, especially being in shift work, you spend more of your time in the job than you do out of the job. So being like that in the job, having that hard exterior, that's day to day.
Mhm.
But to be able to find that switch and be able to turn off and realize, once again, when I can take my armor off and just be me, that was a big learning curve for me. And it's the reason why we have high divorces. It's part of the suicide rate because you talk about hypervigilism. Like I always picture it like most people are just an idling car, but people in high stress situations is if you push on that gas pedal just a little bit and go up to like 200 RPMs, and then we just stay there. And that's our day to day because we're hyper vigilant, and you do that over years and years and years, that engine's going to blow. So you have to find ways to ease off that throttle and let yourself cool down for a second. So,
Oh, 100%. I mean, when to take it back to just, relating to what you're saying, when I got diagnosed with PTSD, I thought from the military, I actually got uh, diagnosed PTSD from childhood because I grew up in a very like gang banging, drive-bys, very violent, very militant, hyper vigilance. And the way it was explained to me was exactly what you just said. It was, I basically kicked that high RPM up for so long, it became my body's normal regulation baseline. Then I joined the military, and then it just kind of created a new higher baseline. And so when I had my mental breakdown, which I've shared on here multiple times, like I went to the psychiatrist and she was literally like, yeah, the survival mechanisms that you had, they got you through, but it's like running an engine with no oil. Eventually it kinks out. And that's exactly what happened. I dammed up all my feelings, I compartmentalized all my trauma, and my body just was like, nope. And mine represented itself in physical attributes. Like I couldn't see straight. My eyes went like dim, and then like I'd get shaky and all this stuff. So one of the things that you said just now that I really wanted to touch on was the intentionality of going above and beyond to just hit baseline. What other people saw as baseline was Jeff literally just coming, like if you did baseline that they saw, you probably wouldn't make it out of irritated. So
Yeah.
you had to go above and beyond to make up for the jaded space just to go to nice guy. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's super important to highlight, because I think a lot of people in those situations, they're not intentional. And if they are intentional, they don't realize how much it's going to take to go the other way. Right? They
Mm-hmm.
think that what it took to get down is exactly what it's going to take to get up, but it's like fitness, it's like life, it's like business. Like what you did to get down here is not going to get you back to here. You're going to have to go above and beyond to get you past that point just to look like you're here. And I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people misunderstand that. And I think it was very admirable. And I think you comported yourself with great admirability in my mind, because you identified that that was a problem. You identified like, hey, this is me jaded. My wife doesn't like it. I don't like being seen like that. But above and beyond that, you had the wherewithal to go, I can't just do a little and think that that's going to fix it. I got to go full bore. It's the only way this is going to happen. And like you said, you're in the job more than you're at home. And it's kind of like Batman. Which one's the mask?
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you're the jaded, hyper vigilant person all the time, then being Mr. Nice Guy may feel really, really weird, because it's no
Mm-hmm.
longer the norm, right?
Yeah. You talk about, which was wearing the mask. You get to a point, especially, me and my wife, we went through marriage counseling for like 14 months straight. And like we were paper thin, we were on the edge. And it got to the point where we were so bad that for me to feel normal was at work. It was more hellish to be at home because it was so unstable. And I grew up in an unstable household, so of course that triggers the childhood traumas. But it felt I'd much rather be at work. I'd take overtime so I wouldn't have to come home because it
Yeah.
was so hostile. And I will take full responsibility that majority of the hostility was coming from me because I was battling my demons.
Yeah. And I think it one, it says a lot about your character that you identified that it was yours. You're now taking responsibility. But I think to your point, like a lot of people go through that. And a lot of men are known, a lot of women blame men for this. And they're like, well, why don't you want to be home? Why don't you want to be around us? Why don't you? The reality is that if I'm going from chaos back to a chaos, it's very hard to be there. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're at fault. It's just that this is chaos that I'm allowed to have, right? Like I'm allowed to be hyper vigilant. I'm allowed to be hyper critical. I'm allowed to be judgmental and use my discernment. I'm productive here with that space. When I come here, it's a negative thing. And if we're here most of the time, then why don't we just stay over here where we're getting praised for it?
Mm-hmm.
And it says a lot about your character. It says a lot about your wife's character too, because a lot of women would have just been like, I'm out.
Oh,
And the fact that both
yeah.
of you saw through the smoke, right? Because it's a battlefield. That's a lot of smoke in that space. There's your trauma, her
Mm-hmm.
trauma, your demons, her demons. Everybody has all the space. The fact that you both were able to come together and say like, fuck, we're better together. Let's work through this. We can be even better than we are. That's
Mm-hmm.
I applaud you guys heavily. I applaud you guys. That's some inspiring shit to me.
Well, and to touch on what you're talking about, the going to work in that chaos, I'm trained for that. I train for these situations. I know how to handle these situations. I would say a lot of us men aren't trained to handle bad home situations, aren't trained to handle bad marriages, aren't trained to handle our demons creeping up on us and wreaking havoc on our relationships. Like there's no real training for that. You know what I mean? Just to get yourself prepared for it. I mean, there is, but a lot of us are just, living our lives. So yeah, you feel more comfortable in that chaos because I got training to fall back on. I've been here before. Like I'm on a wish a motherfucker would status at work, but when I get home, I don't know what the fuck to do.
Yeah.
And I'm so out of my element and I don't feel in control.
Yeah. And
Well,
it,
I
chaos.
didn't.
Yeah, you do now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's that chaos. Men seek chaos to create order. We don't seek chaos to stay in chaos. And I had this conversation earlier today with one of my podcast guests. She runs a women's group, and we were talking about that, where a lot of times what seems benign from a female's perspective is actually creating storms for their person. And what they see is, I just need you to step up and do these things, may be a snapping point for somebody who's coming back into harbor from a really rocky sea, whatever that looks like in their day, whatever that craziness is. And they may not be in the position to be graceful with their words or give you the grace of like, okay, I get it. I know I said I was going to do that, but there's a lot going on, right? Like the communicative side of it is very difficult because when men specifically, and we've talked about this a little bit, we're kind of designed for storms. Like you said, we're trained for that. We can handle that, but we're in control. It's when we feel out of control that those insecurities come up, and then we become uh, overcompensating because we're trying to get control. And that's where I think a lot of men struggle, is because they don't know when to disengage.
Hmm. And they try and use the tactics that work at home and they never do.
Well, because you care for that person,
Yeah.
right? Like it's one thing if you have, and this is why dehumanization is such a sought after political tactic, right? When you look at, and I don't really like talking about politics on this podcast, but not to get too deep into it, but that's what we see in today's world. Like cops dehumanize them, racists dehumanize them, killers dehumanize them, liberals dehumanize them on all sides. Like everything is
Hmm.
about attacking the humanity of that person so that we can dehumanize, disconnect, and then attack without fear of moral conscious repercussions, right?
Yeah.
So when you're at work, there's a certain level of dehumanization you have to do in order to leverage proper logical discernment. Because if you're sitting there
Hmm.
worried, like, this could be my son, this could be my cousin, this could be my uncle, whatever, this is the same for the military. It creates conflicts of interest, it creates emotional compromise. So there's a
Hmm.
certain level of dehumanization. But when you're at home, you really can't,
No.
right? This is the person you love. And Jordan Peterson had a great, and we've talked about Jordan Peterson in the past. He had a great dissertation about how he handled arguments with his wife, because he's like, you want to win? You want to win against your wife. Do you want to live with the defeated person for 30 years? That doesn't sound
Yeah.
like a great metric. Like, you're
Yeah.
going to hang out with somebody who's deflated and defeated and you beat to a pulp. Like, that doesn't work. So you have
Hmm.
to stop looking at things from that combative sense. And to your point, to bring that full circle, it's like you can't use those tactics that you had over here where they go somewhere else after the incident takes place. You could be in a violent altercation and you don't have to see them again. They're off somewhere else and they're dealing with somebody else, and any interaction was ended in that moment. You can't take
Hmm.
that same experience and take it back to a long-term relationship and expect that to work, because you have to go lay in bed together now,
Yeah.
right? And that's kind of aligned with what you were saying. Sorry, I kind of took
Yeah.
over.
100%. No, no, you're all good. But yeah. And, it's like, especially in situations, especially with like military guys, fire guys, stuff like that, you can't really explain the job. And so you can't really, I couldn't really confide in my wife about shit that was going down. One, because I was doing my best to leave work at work. I didn't want to bring it home with me. I wanted work to be work. I wanted my home to be my safe haven. So last thing I want to talk about is what happened at work when I get home. But I'm still trying to recover, still trying to decompress from what the day, and it's one of those fine juggling acts that we all get to do. But
Yeah. And I think women see safe havens differently than men. I
100%.
recently had this realization, just in general. Like, it's not that we don't, like, that men somehow don't need safe havens or women don't believe in creating safe havens for men. I think it's an ignorance. Like, it's like, for women, talking is a safe haven. getting things out, being comfortable. That's intimacy for them. For guys, it's like, just pet my head and hold me. Like, I don't want to talk about
Mhm.
it because I'm trying to keep it over there and compartmentalized. So
Mhm.
that's hard for women, right? It's a meme now where it's like, what are you thinking about? Nothing. Woman, brrr,
Yeah.
guy, nothing. Like, it's,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
enjoying the moment. Like, just let me
Yeah.
be calm
Yeah.
here. And I think there's this kind of, to your point, like, I want that safe haven. I don't want to bring that home. And then the woman is thinking that for her to support and show up for you, that she wants to be what she needs you to be for her, which is the soundboard of like, tell me all your problems, download
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
on me. And you're sitting there going,
Yeah.
no, that's the last thing I want to do because you're my person. I
Yeah.
know what I went through. These demons, I don't want those for you.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's that protector sense versus the nurturing sense, which that masculine feminine energy. Women's nurturing and
Mhm.
compassionate side is like, tell me all your problems and we'll just work through it and we'll feel good, kumbaya, and that's great. And some people in the masculinity space annoy me because they talk shit about that. And it's like, no, that is literally their superpower,
Mhm.
right? Men go and expand the empire, they create the border, and then women make sure it doesn't implode like a flan in the cupboard. Like, they
Yeah.
make sure that the chaos inside and the infighting is all mediated. That's what that
Mhm.
nurturing compassion is for. So it makes sense that they function differently. And that's why I was always like, when partners are like, my wife's my best friend, and they mean it like another man, or
Mhm.
vice versa. I'm like, I'm not against your person being your best friend because that is true. That's the person you're most
Mhm.
intimate with,
Yeah.
but it's not the same. It is not the
Yeah.
same. It is not the shit talking you're going to do with your buddies. It is not the sewing circle that your wife is going to have, that you and your wife are doing, that she would do with her girlfriends. It's just not
Yeah.
the same.
Yeah. And it's, and that's especially this day and age. I'm glad you said that too, because like, this narrative these days is men and women are equal, and I'm 100% against that. And the fact that I celebrate women's differences, I celebrate that there's difference between both of us. There has to be.
It has to be.
And that's just, it's a beautiful mold when we come together that we are different. You know what I mean? And I think our differences complement each other so beautifully, and it's
I love
nature.
that.
You know what I mean?
Yep. I like
And
to say
so
that
like,
men and women are two sides of the same coin.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's and I totally agree with you that there's so many different ways. And my wife yells at me all the time because she's like, how do you think of nothing? I'm like, I don't know, it's my superpower, I guess. Like, I just shut down for a second. Or well, I'll have a talk with like Tony, or I'll be talking with you. She goes, what'd you guys talk about? I'm like, nothing really. She goes, nothing, you talked about nothing. I'm like, pretty much, like, we
For
just kind
four
of shot
hours.
the shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just shot the shit, you know what I mean? It was like
Yeah.
nothing too heavy, nothing too anything. Like, we just vented a little bit, and we
We
talked
just
some
we
shit. That's
sang
about it.
songs. We sing
Yeah.
80s tunes. We
Yeah.
just finish each other's songs.
Yeah, yeah. So, but it's just so funny because they're such unique creatures that when women get together and talk, they talk. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
sometimes
It's
like,
heavy shit. It's heavy.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And sometimes we just need to shoot the shit.
Yeah. And I think that that's, that's one of my gripes with men's spaces in general is it goes, I'm a big person on like, everything's tempered, right? Like, any too far any one way is bad, right? If
Hmm.
you're on the polar edge of anything, you've already lost because you're missing out on some beauty in between. And one of the things that I see a lot in like men's groups is they're either more masculine women in the way that they approach problems. They just want to talk and bitch and
Hmm.
complain, but they don't want to go and do anything. There's no accountability, there's no meritocracy, which is kind of the forefront of how men function mentally, and how we see pride and ego and confidence is primarily merit, right? Like, what do you bring to the table?
Hmm.
What's your asset? How do you succeed in measured up against your group? And so they're sitting there complaining about their women, but I've been in groups where I'm like, you're the woman in the relationship
Hmm.
because you're mad. She's holding you accountable to problem solving, and you just want to talk about it. Well, that's an effeminate structure. Not
Yeah.
saying there's anything wrong with that if you both agree and it works for you, but the fact that you're in here complaining about it obviously means it's not aligned with you. Or the
Hmm.
flip side, where I see this a lot with parenting, where women don't realize that they're asking men to be second mothers. They
Yeah.
want them to father through nurturing, compassionate. Not saying you have to be an asshole. That's not what I'm saying. But there is a certain degree of kind of calculated risk
Mm-hmm.
right? The best example of this is the mom that's like, well, I leave the kid with the dad. He doesn't even know what they're doing. He's not really watching them. Yeah, it's calculated risk. He's breathing. He's safe. He scraped up a little bit. Battle scars are cool. Like, but overall, he's learning lessons in a safe environment where he's allowed to be independent and do what he needs to do without me hovering.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen relationships fall apart because the mother wants a second hovering mother. And the dad's like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to do that. And it falls apart. And it's like, don't try. This goes both sides. I'm not trying to like demonize women by any way. This is just the examples I'm giving, but it goes both sides. Like, men, don't expect your women to parent as a man. Your
Mm-hmm.
mother, the mother's going to hover. She's going to be more compassionate. She's going to be more nurturing. Let her lean into that. Create the safe space for her to lean into that. But on the other side, women, let your men parent as a father.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make him like be the nurturing, compassionate one, because it's gonna play to your strengths, man. Like you said, two
Yeah.
sides of the same token. Like, play to your strengths. It's a beautiful thing when people play to their strengths.
And that's, I'm a lucky father of a beautiful 6-year-old boy. And it's definitely the dynamic between me and my wife. If my son's upset or falls down and gets hurt, my wife is, due to her childhood trauma and her feelings not being met and her feelings not being validated when she was young, she's super hyper focused on it. And she was like, I feel like you don't validate our son's feelings. And I had to explain to her, like, no, if my son falls out and get hurt, so I pick him up and I go, hey buddy, where's it hurt? Okay. And if he's crying, and then I give him about 3 or 4 seconds, and I'm like, all right, buddy, no more tears. We're gonna get through this, because you have to push through it. You can't just spend your whole life sitting there crying about it.
Yeah.
You have to have those tools to be like, okay, this sucks. Now I gotta keep moving forward. Like you said, not just dwell on it. And she's like, I just don't want you. I don't want him to think that his feelings not validated. And I said, I understand what you're saying, but I'm also raising a man. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
these are the stuff that we have to start teaching him, especially around this 6-year-old age, because he's no longer a baby anymore. He's getting into little boy, and he's
And
very
he's
pretty soon
starting to
he's
be
going to
able
be
to think
pre-adolescent.
critically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
100%.
So
Yeah.
it's like it's a fun little dance, and I mean, it's the most beautiful thing is the way a mother can take care of her kid, and just the love that you see that they give and the nurture that they can give. But like you said, we both have our different strengths about it, and we have to know that we're going to be different, but that's okay.
Yeah.
And they're going to lean to us for what they need. And like I said, I think we talked about this before we um, started recording, but I grew up without a father really around.
Mhm.
So this whole being a dad thing to me is so uncharted territory, because I have nothing to mirror it off of.
Yeah.
And it comes to, like, I daily think, like, shit, am I doing the right thing? Like, am I, I'm really trying to focus on trying a human being I'm trying to raise. I'm not trying to raise an asshole. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, who can
Jordan
be, but
Peterson says, raise your kids for people you like. You
yeah,
gotta like your
exactly.
kids.
Yeah.
It's important. A lot of people don't think like that. They somehow think that it's impossible to not like your kids. It's possible if you do it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Don't teach them how to tell the truth and how to not be like, whatever your baseline is. If you can't get that virtue in there, it's possible to not like your kids. So raise
Yeah.
them like somebody you would want to hang out with.
Exactly. So,
And I've heard you with
yeah,
them.
it's just,
You guys have a great relationship. Actually, I've heard your whole family because I'm on mic with you guys all the time. You guys have a phenomenal relationship, right? There's such a
yeah.
great handoff with
Mm-hmm.
you guys. When I'm over here taking notes when I'm on mic. So I'm not the
No,
FBI
no, okay.
exactly recording you guys, but I'm taking notes when I'm on mic with you guys. Um,
Take the shot. Take the shot.
he's way too good of a dad. He's making the rest
Yeah.
of us look bad. But that's the thing with you're not alone, right? And
Mm-hmm.
this is kind of why I started Heroes Veritas, because 2019, 2020, I saw such a lacking of role model leadership in the space of, there are people who've stepped into the role like yourself, fully cognizant and aware that there's a gap and looking to improve and audit it effectively and intentionally. You've done a phenomenal job. And like I said, you guys as a family unit, I know you guys had struggles and you guys went through this. The fact that you came out of that and you're such a strong unit now is absolutely amazing. And I love it. And I love that I've got to experience the outcome of that and now knowing that story. But there's a lot of guys out there that do the opposite. Oh, I didn't have a dad, so they use it as a crutch to be a shitty dad. Or they didn't
Mm-hmm.
know how to lead, so they don't even look to lead. They just kind of like, well, nobody fucking taught me, so I'm just not going to fucking do it. And that's what made me start Heroes originally and start trying to at the time arrogantly reclaim masculinity. But the reality was, like, I wanted the root cause. I wanted the outcome. The outcome is highly morally valuable human beings with great work ethic, integrity, honor. Like, I wanted like a playbook basically for those that didn't have that experience, because I had a great one. My dad was Army, but he was managed by my mom.
Mm-hmm. I lost you there for a second.
Let's switch mics because my mic might have died.
Oh,
yeah, my mic died.
Oh, you're fancy lapel mic.
Interviews today. I'm trying to be too famous over here. I'm getting outside my britches here. So
I got most of that though, just right towards the end there.
Yeah. So like there's this kind of missing gap, and it's not fear, but it's like an insecurity of like, am I missing something that I should have known?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then when you get around other men and you hear what they talk about, masculinity can only be fostered by men.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with femininity can only be fostered by women. So like when you didn't have that and you get around people, what's your baseline look like? Right. And if you never, like you did it the right way, you became intentional. You started looking at what do I want to become? And you started developing that human. Some guys didn't do that. And I'm only saying this not to toot my own horn of like what I built or whatever, but to applaud you, to celebrate you, because you honor your wife as a queen. You treat your son as a prince. You maintain your sovereignty as king of your household. And you did this in spite of not having necessarily the best role model in place. So you're like light years ahead of a lot of people. And which is one of the big reasons I wanted to bring you on, because I wanted to celebrate you and have other people see you, because that's a rare find.
Yeah. And I think, I appreciate the praise, and, get kind of blushing over here, but I think in the fact too, that me and my wife we don't think we're ever done. You know what I mean? We're not like, yep, we've done it. We've won. You know what I mean? We always have to strive to keep bettering ourselves, because it's that drive that's going to keep us going. You know what I mean? And I think, I don't want to get to a point. I mean, there's going to be points where I'm going to enjoy where I'm at. I enjoy where I'm at right now, but I know I can do better in certain areas. And if I feel like I'm good in one area, I want to look in other areas like, well, what can I do over here? You know what I mean? And I think, idle hands is the devil's work. So I want to be busy doing something, trying to make myself better. So
yeah. And I love that you said I can be happy but still moving. And Ed Milet has a great phrase that I think really encapsulates that, and that's blissfully dissatisfied. I'm completely happy being dissatisfied because I'm constantly growing. And I've always taken that a step further when I talk to my clients, especially. And I'm like, listen, life is the game that can only be played. It can never be won. And I think so many people are trying to win life that they never get the opportunity to realize how far they've come, the experiences they've gone. That's why I do the origin story process in my programs, because it gives you an opportunity to do exactly what we're doing here in this conversation. Is you're looking back and you're like, I went through all this stuff and I grew from it. I'm never going to be done because I'm going to find something new to go chase. And it truly speaks a lot to your character. And I truly am amazed by the things you've overcome personally on your own. Like, we all need a team, but you just being willing to question it and challenge it is really great.
Yeah. And it was either a sink or swim, man. Like, I was going to end up, who knows where I would end up if I wouldn't have dealt with it. My father, who just recently passed away, I have a half brother with him, and, we were talking about it because we both kind of had a different run with our father, not the best at runs. And he said, like, I think one of Dad's greatest accomplishments was that we ended up nothing like him. And as heartbreaking as that sounds, I'm like, wow, we didn't, you know what I mean? It could have been so easy for us to just mirror what he did, to bounce and to run away from our problems and not deal with them. And the fact that there's two of us that went through the same thing, we both just, because my half brother, who's divorced but a devout father, like, he lived 2 hours away when he got divorced, and people thought he still lived in town because he coached their football, he coached all their sports. Like he put in the work, and I think it was part of it because we know what the other side is like.
Yeah.
And if we love our offspring too much to not put them, you want better for your kids. And you should, I hope when Bryce has kids, he strives to have a better childhood than he had. You know what I mean? And but still have these core values that I'm trying to set forth in them. You know, hard work, honesty, not being afraid to stand up. You know, not to be a, I hate use the word sheep because it's so overused now, but not being a sheep.
Yeah.
You know, because when everyone's looking around like who's going to take lead, I want to be the person, and I want my son to be that person. Like, well, let's do this. You know, and
Yeah.
so I think if, you know, because it's those type of people this country was built on, that backbone, you know what I mean, of leaders, of people who are willing to take charge. People are put their nose to the goddamn grinding stone and just get the shit done. You know what I mean? Don't ask for nothing. But
that's why I get so frustrated when people say the American dream is dead. It pisses me off because it's like, it's for you. Like the American dream is dead for you. You didn't have to let it die.
No.
Never once. Like you didn't. And to kind of circle back to what you were saying, I like how I say circle back because I know it pisses people off on the conservative side now because of whatever the fuck her name is.
Oh yeah.
But I started picking it up as a joke, and now I say it for real now. So, but to kind of go back to what you were saying, and you said dads always want their offspring to do better than them, and parents always want. I learned that from my father. You learned that indirectly from your father. Yeah, but I feel like that's such an innate experience for like good people, for lack of a better term. Like I don't understand people that can't ignore their kids.
Yeah.
I can't understand parents who don't want their kids' light to shine and their kids to dance around and enjoy being crazy at 4 years old, 5 years old, because they need them perfect little soldiers or whatever. Like I can't understand that because my dad sat me down when I was 12, 13 years old. And I was like, I'm going to be a mechanic like you. And my dad's a mechanic. He's an amazing mechanic. He's extremely successful. Hands down the best mechanic I've ever met. And he said, no, you're fucking not. And I was like, well, you're a mechanic. He's like, yeah, I'm a mechanic, but I want you to do more than me. Because the reality is that while you see me in a good way, my mom was a paralegal at the time or a lawyer at the time, I can't remember. He was going to these parties as a mechanic. He had dirt under his fingernails. He had grease all in the cracks of his hands. They're real leathery. And these people are kind of like, I don't. So my dad saw the other side of the token is like socially, he was a second-class citizen. And so he was like, I don't want that for you. He's like, you can work on cars, but that's not what you're going to do for a living. You need to be better than me. And that never left me. I have sought to be better than my father ever since, not in a bad way, but to honor him. And I hope that when I have children, they do the same thing. They honor me in that way.
Yeah. You know, you work hard so your kids can strive to be better things. And it's a weird dance you got to do because I think, you know, especially kind of our generation, I'm a little older than you, but our generation, I think our parents wanted that same thing, but it turned into they wanted it easier than it was for them. And I think, you know, and that's where you got the generation of the moms who were letting their kids, you know, be 34 and still living with them and filling out their job application for them and, you know, still doing all this because they want it easier for them. I don't necessarily want it easier for my son. I just want it better for my son because you still have to have some adversity in life. You still have to earn your medal in life to really appreciate things. You know, I don't want
you need to be tested, not insulated.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm really striving for my son to have more opportunities, but not necessarily easier for him, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the best things that I ever heard when it came to parenting that I hope I will always keep in mind is I'd much rather them go through adversity and struggle while I'm here to guide them than to protect them from it. And then when I'm gone, they come across it. Like
100%.
That would be one of my biggest fears is that I didn't teach them something that now that I'm gone, they have to go through it alone. Yeah. So I'd much rather, like we were talking about earlier, kind of that hands-off approach as a dad. Like I'd much rather watch him fall down, scrape his knee. We go, hey, 3-4 seconds, now breathe through it, give you the tools to get through it effectively and productively and positively, than to, you know, keep him from ever riding a bike so he never scratches his leg or catch him every time he falls. And then when he's, you know, in his teens or 20s, he's in front of his friends and he doesn't know how to handle that situation. Like, I would feel so bad that I did that to my kid.
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
his friends aren't going to give two shits.
Hell no.
His friends are going to tear him a fucking new one.
Yeah.
And that is kind of like that. You need a dad and a mom, at least from a mechanism perspective, because especially, you know, a man needs to help his boy come to the realization of what it means to be a man. Because women are treated very differently in men's circles. So she wouldn't know what it would look like for him to have a bunch of guy friends.
Yeah.
And vice versa. I wouldn't know how to train a daughter or prepare a daughter for a group of girlfriends.
Yeah.
I would need the mom to do that. And so I think in today's society, to your point, that kind of like, I want it easier for them. It's became more of like a control mechanism of like, so I won't let you experience it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's
I don't want you to ever feel bad. It's like, that's not life.
That's not life at all. Eventually you will die. And that, I would hate for my death to be the first level of trauma that my kid has to deal with.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Could you imagine a perfectly paradisical life, completely utopian, and then all of a sudden the person that made it so dies? The shock, the sheer shock to your central nervous system, I don't think they'd make it.
Yeah.
I really don't. A person like that. I'm just trying to think of that hypothetically, but I couldn't do it. I really couldn't do it. And you've done a great job. Again, the intentionality. And I like I said, I'm on the other side of the mic listening to the family dynamic. And you do a great job of, as you put it, validating Bryce's feelings and then making sure he's got the skills to move forward. I mean, some of the shit that comes out of his mouth, I'm like, I'm going to take that. You're handling that way better than I would fucking handle it. So well done to you.
Oh, thank you. But
that's really what I get out of our recreation things. I mean, yes, the 80s show tune music where we get to sing and finish each other's songs, and that's amazing. But it's really like, for me, you and Tony are men that I respect. And so like the way you guys comport yourself is filling a gap for me, because I don't comport myself with that level of calmness that you two have. It's something I admire heavily, because I'm aggressive as fuck. And people tell me I'm intense, and it's fair. Like, I am intense. Like, I like big, like weighty conversations and a lot of passion. And sometimes that turns into a little over the top. And so you and Tony have this great knack, and it's intentional and cultivated. So I'm not saying it's like you guys are lucky, but you guys have a comportment that I want to hopefully rub off on me, because I admire you guys' calm demeanors in face of all kinds of stuff that I've seen you guys go through, even in the short time that I've known you.
Yeah, and I hold a candle to Tony. Tony has that serial killer calmness. That's just almost eerie at a point.
That's because all he does is watch serial killer podcasts.
Yeah.
I don't even think he's watched my podcast. My best friend has watched hours of serial killer podcasts. And that's okay.
I cannot get a rise out of that guy.
Episode he watches.
Yeah, maybe because it'll be the both of us. That'll be the selling point. And we'll we talk so much shit about you, bro.
The whole fucking time.
Yeah.
We told everybody you're terrible at Elden Ring. We told everybody you're terrible at bowling.
He's like, you can say that. You can say all that, but you don't say that about bowling.
Excuse me.
God bless him too, man. He's raising 2 girls. Man, I can. Whole nother beast.
I remember the day that I realized that I was different than Tony was the day his second daughter was born. Like polar opposites from Tony. He had such a contentment, such a happiness to him that I to this day will never forget. The smile when his second daughter was born, because that's what he wanted his whole life, and anecdotally, I felt like shit because I looked at him and I was super happy for him. And that moment I realized I would never be happy with a family. Not with a family, but just with a family.
Yeah.
I'm so driven to build something, to change the world. Like, that's just how I'm wired. Me hanging out with the fam every weekend and do it, I need more. I need impact. And I felt, I beat myself up. I even talked to him about it. I was like, I beat myself up about it for like a month and a half because I felt like a piece of shit because I don't drive happiness from that. And I was like, isn't that my job as a man, is to be the protector, the provider, and find joy in creating offspring and guiding them into the world. And he was actually the one that was like, dude, it's not bad that you don't see it that way. He's like, you're amazing with my daughters. Like, the minute you were able to come see my second daughter, you did. You lived with us for 6 months and you helped raise Addison at the time when we were struggling. So he's like, I know you'd be a great father, but I also know that you have a lot more to offer. He's like, this is all I care about.
Yeah.
Like that's okay for me. And like, if it wasn't for him, I was going down a real dark path because of that. Because I was thinking I was like fucking serial killer. I thought I was a fucking evil person because
I'm broken. Yeah.
Yeah, because I couldn't find the soul joy of being a father the way he is. He really does. And yeah, watching him with his daughters, it's inspiring. But you're right, 2 daughters and Aaron, love them to death. That's a whole lot of ladies.
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah, that's a whole lot of ladies. Love them to death. Yeah, I need to get Aaron on this. I think she and I would rap for a long time.
Oh yeah. You're gonna have a hard time getting a word in edgewise.
Well, I'm talking more with you than most of my other podcasts, just because of the level of comfort. Normally, I just let the interviewee talk, just like you're here to add value to it.
Organic conversations are the best conversations, anyway. So.
Oh, very much. Yeah, very much. But one thing that I did I wanted to make sure we captured during a conversation today was kind of that insecurity side where you kind of felt like you need to kind of challenge that masculinity a bit because you didn't have the dad. We talked about it a little bit, but I just wanted you to speak about that a little bit more too, because I know a lot of guys that are going through that.
Yeah, it's a hyper vigilant thing. I was blessed to have a grandfather who was an amazing man. He was very old school man, salt of the earth, nose to the grinding stone, like shut your mouth, get your work done type person. And I derive a lot of that. Unfortunately, I lost him when I was like 16. So, I can get choked up even now thinking about it. Like I today, I always wonder, would he be proud of me? You know what I mean? Like, am I doing what I'm doing right now? Would he be proud? But I grew up with a single mom. And at one point, I had my mom and my aunt, and I was surrounded by women. I was at little kids sitting outside of a dressing room with all the bags waiting for my mom to try on clothes. And I'm just, sitting there, and this was before Game Boy and all that cool shit. So I had nothing but my shoes to play with. But, so I didn't have this like overt masculine, like role model. I mean, I had movies and shit like that, but like, I wonder, like, you have that thing, like, am I a masculine man? What am I doing? And then you kind of have to figure out what masculinity means to you. You know what I mean? I think that's a different definition for a lot of different people. I think you and I have similar point of views, but I don't think they're the exact same because it's how we perceive it. So just trying to figure out what my definition would be, because now my son, I'm going to be that person for him, so I'm just like, okay, what am I, I gotta, I gotta walk the walk now because I'm talking the talk. So what is he going to derive from me? What is he going to take from me? And I'm super hyper vigilant. Like, I want him to be a man, and part of being a man is, treating his mom with respect. And I'm so glad you referred to her as my queen, because that's how Bryce refers to his mom. He goes, mom's our queen. I go, 100% she's our queen, and she'll be treated like that at all times. And he does not disrespect his mother, especially in my presence. And that's shit I want you to pass on. Treat women like they're queens, but not all of them are going to be when you come across them. You know what I mean? So you're going to have to find the good ones and do the right thing, and have good ethics, doing the right thing as if no one's watching, and just having, because it's not always going to pay out to do the right thing, but the fact that that you did the right thing it should be pay out enough. You're not going to get praised. You're not going to get a participation trophy in life all the time. So, and those are like the things I'm like, okay, this is the stuff I want to instill in my son as I'm going. And like, it's all uncharted territory because I don't know what the fuck I'm doing now. But like,
well, yeah, I mean, one of the greatest travesties that postmodern, whatever society has given us is a lack of coming of age. 16, you lost the person that was your role model up to that point. 16 to 20 is the pivotal year of transition across the board, like society wise. And so to your point, like, you're in uncharted territory, because when you could have had those adult conversations would have been 16 to 20. Because that's when most men biologically and chemically start to see their offspring as viable, functional. The self-fulfilling prophecy that we see right now, which is really crappy, is the whole, like you mentioned it, people that live with their parents until they're 35. the problem is that you never you never become the peer to your parent.
Yeah.
When you do that. And I've seen this in my own life with people in my family. Like, they're pissed because they're not being respected as a equal adult, but they're still living under the structure of the parent, and still expect all the benefit of the parent-child relationship, but also want the benefit of independent adulthood. And they're conflating the two, and it creates so much contention. And to your point, you want to instill all those things into your child. When do you do it? Are they ready? Can they process it? When do you start? When is it too early to start? To your point, you're hyper vigilant, but do you go to the sports dad who becomes so hyper vigilant they have to be like controlled to the colors they like, what sports they're into, what kind of clothes they wear, how long their hair is? Is that what you mean by hypervigilance? Or is it more so just, to your point, like, what values do I want you to have? What is more important to you? And I think that lack of leadership going into the 20s, we see a lot of men kind of hit this point where without that leadership, they start going more what I call superficial masculinity, right? Colors, clothes, beards versus mustaches versus, right? Like, that's all superficial shit that has nothing to do with your honor system, with your code of conducts and ethic. Versus you're like, I'm hyper vigilant because this is the type of man I want him to be, right? You're letting it flow from the outcome you desire, rather than your insecurity. And yet again, I find myself praising you because not a lot of guys can do that. A lot of guys, that insecurity overshadows any outcome that they're looking for.
And it's I'm no superhero. I have my self-doubt. I have my insecure moments. I have my lack of self-confidence at sometimes. But like we've basically been preaching this whole thing, the point of overcoming that thing and pushing yourself and challenging yourself is really going to make you succeed above everybody else. And like, I know if I raise a good human being and a good man, that he's going to supersede so many of these kids that are coming to age, and they're just going to, I'm just setting him up for such success because he's going to be a trailblazer and not a follower. So, in that way, I am setting him up for him to have a better life than me. So,
yeah. Well, I think it'd be different. I wouldn't say it's better, right? And I've talked to Tony about this a lot too, just because we have that mutual contact. But all of us have kind of a weird background, which is probably why we hit it off really well. Like, we all have kind of this weird, kind of like, for lack of a better term, tragic origin story. We had a lot that happened to us as we were growing up. And so there was a lot of pivotal moments that we missed out on, that a stable environment would have had a different outcome. But I know you're the same as me and Tony. Is like, we wouldn't go back and change a fucking thing.
Nope.
Because to change one thing would completely revolutionize the way our life would be now. So I would just say that, like, Bryce is not necessarily going to have a better life than you, but he's definitely going to have a different life, and a very loving, compassionate, stable life, which is, like you said, the whole goal is to make it improved so that he can then improve on that experience for you. Like, my dad, like, the promise that I made to my dad, so he had a stroke last year and it destroyed me. My relationship with my dad is even deeper than it's ever been before, because that stroke gave him back some of his like youth zeal, because now he's like, fuck, I've been playing life like the long game, but it's pretty short, so he's treating me like a buddy. So he's like calling me like, hey, let's go work on cars, like all this stuff. And one of the things I told him, I was like, I want to build this system, because he is part and parcel to almost everything that I teach in Heroes. Like, he developed almost everything. I've built into it, and I've built on top of it. And that's what I promised him. I was like, you're going to see the system adopted by thousands of people, and you need to know that you're at the core of that. Like, whatever empire I build, whatever sovereign nation that I build, whatever systems that I build, you're at the core of it, because without you, I could not have done that. And I know just the interactions that I see with you and your wife, like, that's going to be the same for Bryce. Like, he's going to come to you one day and be like, I didn't understand it then, but fucking I get it now, because that's what happened to me. Similar to your story, I was raised by my grandma, my aunt, my sister, my other aunt, my mom. My dad was working 17, 18-hour days and only came home when it was like, just wait till your father came home. And then it was discipline. So I didn't have a relationship with my dad until after I was 18. Same with my grandpa. And because of that, I went into my 20s very postmodern, non-traditional, where I was very effeminate. I believed all the rhetoric that was going on at the time about, men being subservient to women and simping, as they call it now, whatever. And it destroyed me. Fucking destroyed me. Because I was at odds with what I felt was right in my heart and what society was telling me to do. And I ran from my dad because people would talk shit about how my dad did things when I would tell them, and they would shame me and I'd feel bad. And then shit would happen and I'm like, my fucking dad was right. Like, y'all are out your mind. You're all fucked up. Like, my dad was right. I don't have any of the problems you guys have because I'm following my dad now. Meanwhile, I have all these people in my life that are lost and confused and have no purpose and don't know what they're supposed to be doing. And I go back to my dad and I'm like, this is how I feel. And he's like, this is all you need. And I follow it and it works. Like, fuck, man. Like, I wasted 10 years in my 20s running from the teachings that my father gave me. And it wasn't until like 29, 30 years old, I was going through a divorce. I went back to my dad. I was like, you're fucking right. I fucked up. But I had to go through that 10 years.
100%. You weren't ready to learn those lessons yet.
Not at all. And now I was talking with a friend yesterday. They're like, the level of conviction you have as a person is night and day what I knew back then. Because back then I was still tiptoeing the political game. I'm like, I don't know, maybe this is not right. I don't like it. Now I'm like, this is the way it is. And it's not like, hey, you're going to follow what I say. This is the way it is. It's this is the way it is for me. Take it, leave it, don't care. This isn't changing because this is my baseline. And that's really all you can want for your kids. Give them a good baseline that they can build on and then stand convicted to. Right? One thing you said earlier was that ethics piece. And Jack Donovan, he put down the virtues, which I did podcasts on, which is strength, courage, mastery, and honor. And he put those in his book, The Way of Men, which I absolutely love. It's a cornerstone of all masculinity because it's from a place that is really timeless. But it's the honor piece that a lot of people fuck up. Because honor is just a standard or a system of ethics, standard of conduct that people match and follow. Well, the honor of a cannibal is very different than the honor of a non-cannibal.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are over there hanging out with cannibals. They're on the menu and they're wondering why they're not matching the honor and they're trying to fit in.
Yeah.
And it's like, you got to give them to your point, you know, to use the language, like the sheep thing. Like, yeah, it's kind of a overused term right now. It's a little bit tripe now, but it's true. You want somebody who's going to stand up and be like, yeah, I see you guys heading for a cliff. I'm going to hang over here.
Yeah.
You know, and that's part of being able to give them that baseline and understand who the honor system's for. What's the outcome of the honor system? Is it for me to follow what you tell me to because I don't want to have any problems? Or is it for me to feel like I can look myself in the mirror and really hold to my guns and make my dad proud, for lack of better, you know? Yeah. Sorry, I got triggered on that one. So
no, it's all good.
Pulling it back to you, Jeff. You take that.
No, it's all good. Like, you know, it's the way of the world, man. And we're just all trying to figure it out.
That was one thing that I had to learn the hard way. Nobody knows what the fuck they're doing.
Hell no. That's, you know, going in my late 30s, like I remember like being in my early 30s, like, man, when I hit my late 30s, I'm gonna have all my shit figured out. Now I'm here and I'm like, I am just older and probably have better tools to deal with this shit, but I'm no better off than I was.
Yeah, and I'll be like that when I'm 70.
Exactly.
At least I hope, because to your point, like the only way that you wouldn't have those problems is if you stop.
Yeah.
Right. I like to quote Mark Evans. He likes to say, stop being king of the dipshits.
Yeah.
He helped me. I talked to him. He really helped me. I got to meet him in person and he told me that and it blew my mind, man. Because a lot of us were mentally masturbating at the top of our rung and we're cool in the dipshit category and we're the top of the fucking class, but we never step into that next quality level because we're afraid of being at the bottom again. And that's the only way to avoid all the problems you were just talking about or have your shit figured out is you play the same game over and over again and you never change the game.
Yeah, it's easy. What do they say? Easy to be a big fish in a little pond.
Yeah, exactly. Until you get into the ocean with the big fish, you know?
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what like really stood out to me. What you just said is like, I didn't know what I was doing. And I don't think we ever will. I hope I'm 70 going, fuck, I don't know. Google it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I do that all the time right now. Somebody's like, what do you think about it? I don't know. I'll Google it. Give me a sec.
Yeah.
Look shit up all the time. I found out the other day that it takes 3 months to get to the moon. Takes 6 hours to get to the ISS. Yeah. Or 3 days. Sorry, not 3 months, 3 days. So it could take either six hours to get to the International Space Station or 3 days, depending on if it's docked off of Earth or docked off the moon.
You know, I have a such a gift of bullshitting, and it's just going to the wayside now because everybody can just fact check everything I say.
The fish I caught was this big.
Exactly. Where at? On this, like, they don't have fish that big. It says here on Google. God damn it, Google.
You're ruining good stories.
Exactly.
You know, I actually, when I was in my 20s, embellishment is part of human culture. And there was a dissertation I watched, and it kind of like really changed how I storytell. And it was around how the free flow availability of facts, it has a profound impact on culture, because there's almost a cynicism that is an indifference that is kind of a byproduct of having that much knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Like, almost like what's the word that I was trying to say? An innate ego.
Yeah.
Like, well, I can just look it up real quick and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
I don't fucking know. And it got me thinking about movies. Right? Like, there's no movies I really want to go see. Like, very rarely. And I wonder, thinking back on that with the thing you just said, people can fact check your story. Like, I wonder if it's because it's harder to suspend belief.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's harder to suspend the mysticism because we know so much about the world, the tangible world around us.
Yeah.
Which is probably why video games is so much fucking fun, because you can suspend it while you fucking fight things.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and you talk about embellishing, and sometimes embellishments in the stories can give it more power. Speaking of movies, I always remember that scene in Remember the Titans where he's telling Sunshine, the quarterback, and he's like, my parents died, both left me within the same month, and I was there with 12 brothers and sisters. And he goes in and he starts swinging, and the coach goes,
12 brothers and sisters?
Yeah, 12, he goes, 7. He goes, right, 5. Yeah, 7 or 5. He's like, yeah, 12 sounds better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, the message is still there, but it's a little more punch to it if you just embellish just a little bit.
And if you look at, like, part of that dissertation that I was thinking about is, right, I'm coming up with this concept of heroes veritas, and I'm bringing gravitas to language again. Like, that's what I tell people. I want to bring gravitas and weight to language. And part of that is embellishment, right? Like, think about the last 3 generations. Where did we stop having heroes and legends? And as soon as the TV started being in color.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because now people can get information and visually see the information. They're not embellishing through oration. And so you look at, you know, like the legends of the past, right? You have Greek mythology, Heracles, you have, you know, the gods and all these things, right? Heracles was probably just a really strong dude that could deadlift 700 pounds.
Yeah.
But now there's videos of people doing that. So it's not as crazy, you know, like,
yeah.
Like, was the Nemean lion really fucking 16 feet tall and fucking 3 tons? Probably not.
Yeah.
But it kind of made it better of a story, right? Like, you remembered him, right? Yeah. And there's this kind of like, that cynicism makes me wonder if, when, you know, we're all dust as a species, or as a civilization rather, because the species will probably go on and evolve into some lobster-esque thing. But what are they going to find in our culture? Dog filters?
Yeah.
Doofy dudes in television that are like, I can't do the laundry because I'm stupid, because I'm just a man. Like,
yeah.
Is that really what we want to leave behind? We want to leave this structure of shitty cultural arts and satire as our only means of record.
Yeah. Are they gonna ever get back to like the Winston Churchills and like the real men of the past?
Yeah. And you know, over the last 2 years, I think that there's been a stigmatism of struggle. you know, and again, not trying to get into the politics and things, but if you've been in the US over the last 2 years, there's a very polar divide. And there's those that want personal responsibility in line of freedom. And then there's those that believe that freedom should be trumped by control and in the name of safeguarding the group populace, right? And one of the things that started to really frustrate me over the last 2 years is people that are like, when's it going to end? I wish this wasn't happening. These times are so difficult. And I'm like, I fucking love these times. I fucking love these times. Why? Because when dragons exist, dragon slayers arise. Like, that is how this works. Winston Churchill couldn't be Winston Churchill without a war, right? He couldn't, you know, the MLKs couldn't be MLK without divide and negativity, right? Like segregation. Like, struggles define us. Stop looking at struggles as a negative thing and start looking at that as your opportunity to really become who you were built to be and why you're here in this moment. And I try and get people to understand that. Like, maybe you're indirectly infecting it. Maybe you're holding a candle for somebody. Maybe you're talking to somebody, whatever. The reality is that whatever time you're in, you were here and you could have a purpose here. Just whether or not you lean into it.
Yeah. You know, and it's like that saying, hard times make hard men make easy times make easy men. You know, we're in the hard times. So I'm excited to see the hard men start stepping up and taking accountability.
We're really seeing it, right? Like real time, like you would be the next generation that is creating. You said it yourself. I want Bryce to have ethics. I want my child to have ethics. I want him to be a highly moral, ethical person. That has not been an intentionality in the way we raise in the last 2 generations. It has been, I don't want to be like my parents. That has been the intentionality behind parenting for probably the last 2 generations. And instead, you're seeing a rise in men stepping up and going, no more fatherless homes. If I'm going to be a father, I'm going to be the best father. I'm going to give them a role model that they can look up to. I'm going to give them the tools, not the protection. I'm going to give them the ability, not the safety. And that is happening real time. I'm seeing it in you. I'm seeing it in Tony. Those just in my close circle there. I'm seeing it in people like Matt Boudreau, who we're going to have on here, who's creating an entire educational system. Tim Kennedy, who's also doing that. I know some people have some issues with him, but he's building Apogee Park and he's doing all this stuff to create kinetic learning systems so that we can start bringing high morality back into part of the culture, because it's been disconnected. We just send our kids to public school and they get told how to do these things or whatever. And we're kind of like blind eye to what the culture side of it is. We're just kind of like, go. Now we're seeing parents really dig in and get into the muck with their children and say, listen, like, I get this is hard, but this is what we believe as a family. And if anybody comes at you, then you come to me, but I'd like you to handle it first. That is a huge improvement from the last 2 generations that I've personally seen in so many of the parents that I'm seeing come out of the last 2 years, and yourself included, Tony included. And it's been, for me, it's been an honor to watch, because I get connected with parents who know what I'm trying to do with Heroes Veritas, right? Outside of my circle. And I don't know who they are directly. I don't really have any, but the things that they come in and say, you know, and I'm like, there's hope, right? There's a place for people now. That's what Heroes Veritas is always supposed to be, is a place. It's supposed to be a place for people to put morality over pleasantries and put hard decisions over ease of access and all these things. And so my greatest joy is watching parents step back into it and saying, no, discipline is needed, but it has to be tempered. And you need to have man and you have to have woman, and they have 2 sides of the same token, to go full circle from the original part of this conversation. It's been society's not over, man. Like, we're just in an ebb of flow. Part of it, we're at the ebb. And to your point, we're on the uptake, and I'm excited for it, because there are going to be some real powerhouse heroes coming out of this next 2 generations, including Bryce, including Addie, including Ainsley. Like, these are some pretty fucking badass kids that are going to be coming out of that, because they have parents who are intentional and not insulating, but guiding, like truly guiding and mentoring. And that's what it's all about, man.
For sure.
Well, Jeff, I literally will talk to you all night. In fact, we have many times. So before we end our very organic and enjoyable conversation. I'm really grateful that you were willing to do this. I wanted to touch on a couple things.
Okay.
First, Jeff has agreed to range master a basic pistol course that'll be coming out somewhere in the end of June here locally. We're still figuring out the details, but get used to his face, get used to his name, because he's going to be connected with us doing basic pistol courses. He's going to help us out by giving you guys the tools to, learn the basics of pistol courses without that kind of like pretensia around the gun community. We're going to try and remove that barrier of entry that a lot of people have. Again, still trying to get the details worked out, but keep in touch. Follow, subscribe. Jeff is going to be a part of that, and we're really excited to have you there, man. And I've learned from you already when we went out shooting, so I know what kind of value you're bringing to the table, so I'm really excited.
Yeah, no, and it's definitely, I don't have ego behind it. The big thing is I'm not John Wick. I'm not going to teach you how to curve the bullet, but I definitely feel confident in my ability to at least get you a basic foundation. And if I can give you a foundation, then you can seek outside me or do other means, and you can put the roof and the walls up. But I can give you a pretty sturdy foundation. I'm very confident in that aspect.
I'm excited for that, just as a kind of a refresher for myself.
And just when I became a range master, it was a really fun course. Besides getting pepper sprayed, but it was a really fun course because the fact that like it's one of those idiot like aha moments when I really started to focus on trigger press and breathing control and actually thinking about my stance, and my grouping got smaller. It's like, oh well, maybe they do know what the fuck they're talking about.
It's a little bit of thinking.
Yeah.
But that was the moment you were like, damn it, I'm not John Wick.
Exactly. And it's definitely a diminishing skill. So it's something you have to continue to work on, because even I noticed it'll go a few weeks and I can't shoot nearly as good as I used to. So, and the way ammo is, I can't shoot as much as I want to now, but it's definitely as much as I can. But I can even show people when we get through it, I can show a bunch of dry fire skills that you can do in your house and save ammo and still get good trigger press, good sight alignment. So we'll have fun.
Yeah, I'm excited. Also, you and I have a ruck planned.
Yes.
Should we open that up to our audience here? Would that be cool?
Anybody wants to do it, man. I can, and if it's something we got to do more in your neck of the woods, well, yeah, we'll do it.
I liked your original plan, like that 18 miles. So 18 miles. So if you're wanting a challenge, somewhere in June, we're going to be doing it. We'll get some details out to you guys, but worst case, you guys don't show, we're still going 18 miles. So it's up to you guys if you show, but it would be a lot of fun if we could get some group out there, maybe some, other military, Leo, firefighter, somebody who just wants to challenge himself, like come out, we'll have a blast, and we'll figure out some stuff.
Yeah. Just do hard shit.
Just do hard shit. It's gonna be awesome. So last, before we wrap this up, my biggest focus is value add to service industry. Podcast is service industry. I love adding value, and I think these conversations give that caught not taught option, which I think is the best way humans learn, is catching things as it goes through in just a conversation. But I always like to have concise tips at the end. So I'd like to ask you to either give top 3 tips that you think you could add value with people, or best advice you ever received.
Well, the one tip I kind of touched on it, but I think if you really take and audit your life and your skills, mental skills, physical skills, anything, majority of them are diminishing, and you need to get repetitions. So if it's writing your thoughts out, if you don't do it, it's going to diminish. Your thought process is going to diminish. If it's me for positivity, being as positive as possibly can, if I didn't do it, it was going to diminish. I was going to revert back to my jaded self. Most things in your life will diminish over time if you don't put the reps into them. It takes 10,000 reps to become proficient in anything, and 10,000 reps is a lot of fucking reps. So get your 10,000 reps in. Whatever it is you need to want to improve on, know that you got 10,000 to go, and don't stop till you get 10,000 in. Best advice I was ever given. I kind of shared with you, my father just passed away this year in February. And, it was a really big mind fuck, being the fact that I didn't have a good relationship with him. And I was a lot more devastated than I was prepared to be. I thought I was going to be okay with it, and I wasn't. And I reached out to a buddy of mine who kind of had a rough relationship with his father, and his father was all of a sudden taken away from him. And it was the simplest, stupidest information, but it just resonated so well with me. And he said, you're going to have a lot of feelings come your way. Allow yourself to have them. And by that, it doesn't mean you're going to dwell in them and you're going to stay in them, but you have to allow yourself to have them and move past them, or they're just going to. I had a bad habit of burying shit. Buried it down deep inside. We'll visit later. And by later, I mean never. And that's when we start having our mental breakdowns, health problems, everything like that. So if you're
It's like
ever
swallowing
dealing
a
with something,
grenade, man. It's not a
yeah,
good.
exactly. Yeah. And so it just in day-to-day life, it's okay to have emotions. It's okay. It doesn't make you any less of a man. It's I think the masculinity comes out with after you have your emotion, working through it and getting past it. That's in my opinion where masculinity and man and being a man comes in. But not having emotions doesn't make you a man. It just is a ticking time bomb inside of you. So it's going to catch up to you, and it's with you no matter what, and you're never going to run from it because it's going to be right behind you. So that
Human
was some of the
condition,
best
man,
advice.
doesn't
Yep.
change. No, I love it, and I would take that a step further to kind of close out that thought that you said. Like, it isn't masculine to not have emotions. It's a ticking time bomb. But what is, and this isn't even masculinity. This is leadership, because as a man, your job is to lead your people and your tribe. And this is my opinion. You need to be able to work through it constructively. So yes, feel it very much, but no time and place, right? Like you shouldn't be a blubbering mess while your kid needs you, right?
No.
Like you, like there's certain times that it just isn't appropriate. And don't let that become a responsibility dodge, because I've seen other guys do this. Well, my dad died, so I get to just fuck off and get drunk and drink away my problems and smoke weed, and like that is not what that is. That is not feeling those emotions. That's numbing you. Truly feel the emotions, but don't let it bleed onto all the other areas and fuck up shit that you've been working hard for, because you've probably been working hard on a relationship, a job, a quality of life. Definitely feel it, but know when to temper and how to temper it. And if you need guidance on that, I'm always happy to have conversations with people on that. I think I mentioned it earlier. I can't remember if I mentioned it on this podcast, but somebody texted me today because somebody's father just couldn't handle their demons from World War II and committed suicide. So that's a prime example. They just swallowed that grenade for 3 decades, 4 decades, like however long it is. I don't even know how long it is from then, 60 years. And finally it just got too much and they just ended themselves, and the family had to find the person. And it is far greater to ask for help and lean on people and comport yourself accordingly than it is to swallow a grenade and blow up on them later. I can guarantee you that. So thank you for that lesson. Thank you for the call. Thank you for everything that you do already. I'm looking forward to all the things we have planned for the future, but also just really grateful for your friendship, sir. I'm
buddy.
Very, very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You guys are just tuning in. This is Jeff Pease, Tim Bass. Here's Veritas Podcast. We went over a lot of cool stuff today. This was a very casual conversation because we're friends, but a lot of great value from you, Jeff. Really appreciate it. So if you guys like this, make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe. We can only grow if you let us grow. And we'll check you next time on Here's Veritas Podcast.
Your spirit.